I'm going to be doing the Turbo Talk during your lunch today, presented by FireEye. My name is Alexis Culp. I'm a consulting systems engineer for the West. And we're going to go over kind of the state of the landscape and what FireEye kind of does and provides as a service to all of us. So the FireEye approach is an adaptive defense model. And it starts with something that you're all very familiar with, which is general technology. Right? So we all have technology trying to detect, trying to alert you. Our technology at FireEye can detect both known and unknown threats. So it's not a signature-based technology. It covers all vectors of entry. So we'll talk about vectors that would be ways that malware gets in the organization. So web, email, data centers, web servers, mobile devices, USB stick in the parking lot. Our technology is founded over 10 years ago. It's patented. It's a hardened hypervisor that we built from the ground up, and it's designed around security and nothing else. So I'll go in more into that technology in a moment, but it's really kind of like a three-tier idea that FireEye has on approaching today's cybersecurity issues and landscape. That technology, as it sits out there collecting information, it feeds into an intelligence data bank. And that intelligence data bank is basically, we're looking at roughly 50 billion objects every day. And I don't just mean files. It could be events in a SIM. It could be behavior that we see when we're doing what we call incident response, post-breach work. We're in the front line of most of the incidents that you've read about in the news. So without disclosing anything about any of our customers, you can certainly, you probably know, FireEye responds to most of the major breaches out there, and that also feeds into this intelligence data bank. We've got over 1 million network sensors out there. We're deployed on millions of different endpoints as well. Hundreds of malware analysts and intel experts. And we've discovered 20 of the last 30 0 days that are actively exploited. No other security vendor out there actually can claim any statistic like that. The third silo of what we kind of do at FireEye is the expertise. So if you feel like you might have something in the network and you're not sure, FireEye is the kind of company that can come in and do like an assessment to see if you're compromised. If you're in a specific vertical, let's say it's banking, and you read online that a certain bank has become compromised and you want to know if you have what they have, you can contact us. That's one of the things that we do as far as our experts. We also do incident response as well. So if you already know that you are compromised and you can't get it out of the network on your own, FireEye is a go-to for that as well. The expertise that we have, the responders, they also feed into this intelligence database. And this intelligence database on an hourly basis feeds into all the products, all the endpoints, all the network sensors, the email sensors, all of that. So it's a continuous circle of intellectual sharing and crowdsourcing. What's really important when we're talking about the technology that FireEye has is understanding the attack from beginning to end, the full kill chain. Today's attacks start with an exploit typically. It's not normally just a file. Sometimes it is if it's an attachment via email, but it's an exploit. It's something that can't be patched. That the vendor of a software product has a bug that a hacker has discovered, and they're utilizing that bug to get into the network, and it cannot be patched. It's not because you didn't apply the latest CVE. We have tremendous exploit detection. So that's really kind of how we found most of those 0 days, is detecting that exploit. If you do not detect the exploit, the rest of this kill chain that's on the board right now, so from exploit, callback, malware binaries coming down, or malcode coming down, maintaining persistence in the network, and then, worst case scenario, the data going out the door, the data exfiltration. If you don't see the exploit, the rest of it can be completely obfuscated and encrypted and unseen. So it's crucial that you see the thief when they walk in the door. If you don't see that coming in the door, then you typically don't see the data going out the door. So how does this technology work? So we have something we've built called an MVX, multi-vector virtual execution environment. And what it is it's our own virtual environment. Again, it's purpose-built for security. It doesn't do anything else except look for malware, look for malicious behavior, malicious intent. It's a hardened hypervisor, so, absolutely hackers are going to try to see if they're sitting in a sandbox. Absolutely. If I bring up a VM right now with VMware, and I throw a PDF that came in my spam and open it up in there, there's a good chance it's not going to do a thing. Because it's going to check the services, it's going to look for certain services running, processes running. It might check for system time moving forward, certain log files being incremented. We've built in anti-evasion techniques, over 300 into this hypervisor, and this hypervisor is over 10 years old, so this is not something that we just created. We're actually first to market with the idea of virtualizing not only objects when you open them up in an environment like this, but full packet workflows. I'll give you a really good example. You go to CNN.com, there's ad space. That ad space is what contains the exploit, not CNN.com. We're not looking at one URL. We're looking at 100 different URLs that are being rendered and replicating that across multiple operating systems with multiple versions of Java, Adobe, whatever, Flash, whatever it's exploiting. Again, that's how we find both the known and the unknown threats. And we cover all the vectors. So if your Android device gets compromised and they steal all your contacts, and they also steal some of the email that you've had with those contacts, they can specially tailor a Spearfish email now. Let's say your son or daughter is in a sports program and they'll send you the sports schedule and it looks like it's from the coach and you're going to open it up because you trust it. That's a real Spearfish. That's actually something that has happened. So we correlate all the vectors as well. It's not just, hey, you've got something on this machine that's bad. It came from here. It spread laterally there, and correlating that whole thing so you can see the full kill chain of what's happening in your organization. It's also built for high performance and efficacy, so we can bring up hundreds of VMs in a single moment in time and replicate your bits, your packets, across those at the same moment in time. In 4 minutes or less, determine whether something is malicious. And the really cool thing about this technology isn't just determining that it's bad. I mean, sure, hey, it's bad. What we want to know is what the callback communication is going to be. When this thing is done and it's compromised this system, is it going to go lateral? Is it going to try to set up a proxy internally? And when it's taken data out the door, let's say it's a keylogger or something very simple, where is it going to send that data? So at that same moment, we actually push the clock forward in time, whether it needs to be hours, weeks, months, it doesn't matter in this virtual environment. 4 minutes, in real time, will determine that it's malicious, determine what it wants to do, its behavioral forensics, and also determine what the callback is. Once you have the callback, you can share that information through syslogging with other devices that you have in the network, or you can put the FireEye online, you can block it. So if I have a thief that comes in my house, takes my TV, takes all the cool stuff that I've got, my drone, whatever, if they can't get out of my house, I never had anything stolen. So we're looking at about 2 million objects per hour across network, email, mobile, file systems, data centers. And we're popping those into this MVX detonation chamber. And that's where we're discovering the zero-day exploits that we discover. That's also where we're generating that command and control information before it actually happens in real time. And that's how we're able to actually prevent the breach from being successful. Again, we're going to correlate that across everything that you've got. So if it started with an Android device and then made it to your email on whatever device you have in the office, but then went out the door on somebody else's device. A really cool thing that we published last month was we found a hacker actually posting the data that they wanted to exfiltrate on Microsoft TechNet. That's something that all your web filters is allowing right now, communication and post to Microsoft TechNet. And it was just gibberish. And the hacker picked up that gibberish, deleted their post, and put it back together and had their data. So it's not going out the door necessarily over UDP. It's not going out the door the way that you might think. It can go out the door in various different methods. And learning about those methods in the detonation chamber, the MVX, is pretty much crucial. And that's how FireEye has gotten most of the brand recognition that you know us for as far as zero-day detection. That's the technology piece. But I also had up, the 3 pieces: technology, intelligence, and expertise. Let's talk about threat intelligence. What exactly is that? Is that IOCs? Well, that's a piece of it, indicators of compromise. Could be a domain, could be an IP, but that's all signature-based stuff, right? Once you learn that once, you share that with everybody, and then everybody knows that, and the hacker's not going to use that stuff anymore. They're going to do something new. What we consider threat intelligence is actually knowing who's knocking on the door, what kind of thief is coming in the house. Are they sponsored by a nation state? Is it regional? Is it something that only one state or location or county is seeing? Is it something that is specifically targeting a specific vector, like financial, healthcare, retail? This year's the year of the healthcare hack, right? You've heard that in the news. You've seen it in the news. They have to go public when they're hacked. Last year was the year of the retail hack. So these things change. They morph. There's money being made. And so whenever there's money being made, threat actors will pursue whatever the lowest hanging fruit is. We've basically got a huge intelligence database on the tools, techniques, and procedures that today's hackers use. And that gives us a very unique ability to come into your network and assess it, tell you if you have something, and also be able to create products and technology to detect it and prevent it. So, traditional defenses have always been what? What file is bad? What MD5 signature is bad so my desktop AV can block it? What URL is bad that I don't want my employees going to this phishing site? It's always about what, when really it's about who. You want to know who's coming in the door so you know what they're trying to steal. So the who leads you to the what. There's a person behind this keyboard. This isn't just some random thing that happens because you opened up a spam email. These are highly customized, highly tailored attacks, and they're specifically targeted when they decide to send a piece of code out that they went through the painful process of figuring out what the exploit is. They're not going to send it to everybody. They're going to tailor it and target it so that it's successful, it's stealthy, and it goes undetected by other security vendors. These are well-funded nation-state actors. So the government of China has a building. We came out with a report called the APT-1 report. You're welcome to find it on our site. They have a building, and they have, government employees that come in on a day-to-day basis and hack. One of the interesting statistics that you can get from something called the M-Trends report, which you can find a copy of, a takeaway, or you can get an electronic from our site. Chinese New Year is a great time to do change request controls in your network because that's the least amount of activity that we see for malware. They're all on vacation, all of them. It's not the Russians, so there's still some out there, but China takes a nap during Chinese New Year. They're relentless. When I mean relentless, even if you have FireEye come in and get them out, you better bet they're coming back. You know, if I'm a thief and I'm in your house and I'm in your house for 6 months or more, I know everything that you do. I know on Friday at 3 o'clock is when you accept all your LinkedIn ads. I know what sites you shop at. I know who you email the most. I know what time you come in. I know what time you take lunch. I know everything about you. You're low-hanging fruit now that I have all this data. I'm not going to go, once you kick me out, go try something else. I'm going to try to get back in probably the same way that I did in the first place. So the intelligence and expertise, I'll come back to that. Again, we're looking at about 50 billion things per day. So we're bringing up 50 billion virtual environments per day where we're emulating full web flows, opening up attachments in email, clicking links in email for you. And on average, and this statistic continues to grow, so, and I apologize, it's really hard to keep these slides up to date because they change so frequently, these statistics. We find over 400,000 unique pieces of malware every day that are only seen once. So any sort of endpoint that you're using that's signature-based, any sort of traditional security that you've been told, through PCI compliance and HIPAA compliance to buy, is pretty much rendered useless because they're not going to see it more than once. So they can go ahead and create a signature and they can update it, but that piece of code, that bad site, that's not going to be seen again. That domain that they use for command and control, that's not going to exist anymore. On the expertise side, last year we delivered over 100,000 hours of incident response. That's a lot. That's a lot of information that we've gathered by going into organizations that are compromised either publicly or privately. You don't know half of the ones, or probably 85% of the compromises you're not even aware of. Going in there and figuring out what the tools and techniques and procedures of these hacker families are. We also look at about 1 billion events per day. So we have a security SIM, we have other things that are looking at events. Those could be events from our products, those could be events from our incident response or assessments, those could be events from your SIMs. Again, we discovered 20 out of the last 30 actively exploited 0 days. Now there's a lot of CVEs, right? Every day somebody else finds a common vulnerability. This isn't that. I mean, these do become CVEs when we discover them, but this is basically something that nobody else can say. And what's an interesting statistic on this 20 out of 30, 18 of those 20 were found by our products. That MVX technology I just discussed, this is about 2.5 years worth of 0 days that we're tallying here. It's all found by the MVX, 18 of those 20. So that's phenomenal. That's not a bunch of people in a room looking at code. That's a product generating an alert that is on something that it's never been seen before and determining through the behavior of that code or that exploit that it's malicious and determining what that command and control is. The other 2 that we found was through something called FireEye as a service, where we go in and sweep your network on a regular basis just to make sure everything is safe. Let's talk about email versus web. This is a statistic I got from the intelligence team. It's pretty recent. However, we did find another 0 day since I got this data. This is about 30 days old. So minus the most recent 0 day that we discovered, which is called clandestine wolf, 10 out of the last 0 days, 7 of them came through drive-by download. That's that CNN example I gave you. That's ad space. You're just landing on a page and you're getting infected. 3 of them used email as an entry vector. Believe it or not, your employees at your company are going to open the attachment. We just need to accept that as fact. It can be the spearfish I described about the coach emailing you about your kid's soccer event. It could be a purchase order to the PO, or better yet, it could be something from FedEx. I've never had FedEx proactively contact me via email. But they're going to open it because it's a gift for them. And it might even have a password in it to keep it safe. All the things, it might even have misspellings. I mean, people are going to open it. You're going to have attrition in your organization. You can train them till you're blue in the face, but you're going to have new hires, exiting employees, and you're always going to have this vector of human error. Out of those 10, also 7 of them can be directly correlated to nation-state sponsored attacks. So I'm talking about the Russian government, Syrian Electronic Army. Really, I'm talking about China, but I don't want to beat on them too much. We follow about 500 different threat actor families. That could be from one hacktivist in Anonymous to the nation-state of China. About 50 of them cause the most problems for everybody. 14 of the ones that were most recently researched as of about 30 days ago, they're still using spearfishing as a main vector of entry, so 5 of them use spearfishing. 8, again, drive-by downloads. That's just average, everyday surfing. And 1 of them actually used both techniques. Now that's interesting. That's where I send you a link in an email, and you click on it, and you get infected. So that's also something we're not supposed to be doing, but we still do that. Another statistic I got from the intelligence team that I thought you would find interesting is that lateral movement does not mean malware. So if my machine gets infected because I had a drive-by or I opened up the email from FedEx, however it got infected, it's not going to call command and control necessarily from my machine. It's going to try to go to every other machine in the organization. And how it does that is not by pushing an executable across the line. Remember I said there's a human behind the keyboard. So they can actually infect a machine and take ownership of it without actually having an executable. They just elevate their permissions and move lateral. So about 48% of the machines that we worked on last year that were compromised, out of either incident response or compromise assessments, actually didn't have any file that you could delete and say, this is the bad file, this is the file we need to make a signature for and make sure it's not in the network. It's kind of a scary thing, right? Because everybody's moving towards endpoints and trying to figure out different ways to approach this problem, but the bad guys are going to constantly morph and change their game. So it's really about having the experience the intelligence, and the technology to back that up because you don't have enough man hours to do everything manually. Let's talk about the impact of the traditional model, and I'll explain what I consider to be the traditional model. These are the 5 things that you're told to own in order to have a secure network. Firewall, whether it's next gen or not. Desktop antivirus. You can't have any health information or personal identifiable information or credit card information without AV. Spam filtering. And then the other 2 are iffy. You know, maybe people are allowed to go anywhere they want on the web. So web security or proxy, it's up to you. And IDS, IPS, intrusion detection or intrusion prevention. Those are the 5 things that if we were talking 3 years ago, I know all of you have budget for that. And that's what you feel like you buy, and you're protected, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. That's not working. So the statistics of what the traditional model does, and if you notice the one that says 100% at the bottom, everybody was up to date. This isn't your fault that this is happening in the network. You could have the up-to-date firewall. Of course, your AV's up to date. You've upgraded everything. You've done everything that the vendors have told you to do, and you're still getting malware in the network. So on average last year, 205 days is the average that a hacker stays resident in the network. Now that's actually vastly improved. 2013, it was 229 days. And in 2012, it was 243 days. So we shaved a month and a half off almost. That's still a lot of time to be in a network, and they basically own everything. If I had a thief in my house for that long, they've taken not only the electronics, but they're taking the kitchen sink and seeing if they can sell it on Craigslist while they're still in my house. So it's a long time to be in a network, and it's a lot of data that can be gathered about all of your behavior. Just like we're gathering data about their behavior, they're doing the same about us. Once you do discover that something's in your network, and by the way, about 70% of the time it's not of your own volition. You have somebody else telling you you have something in the network, whether it's a 3-letter agency like the CIA or the FBI. It could be Visa saying, hey, we think you're compromised because a lot of credit card transactions from your location, people who have used credit cards at your location seem to be breached. So it's going to be typically a third party that's going to knock on your door and say that you have malware. And then it's going to take you about a month to get it out, no matter who you hire. That's how long it takes to get on every single endpoint and see if it's gone lateral, see if it's there, because we're not looking for a file, remember? 48% doesn't use a file, doesn't use a service. So we're looking for other things on the system. Maybe access with elevated credentials, things like that. Now, the average cost of a breach is different for everybody. So this is going to be the big guys who lost millions and millions of dollars down to the little guys who only lose a couple $100,000. But the average cost last year was $3.5 million on average. So FireEye's approach to this, and I'm sorry if it's a little cut off over there. Our technology, we use our technology to do 2 things. Prevent what we know, absolutely. If we've seen this before, we've seen the command and control before, we want to block it. But really it's to detect things that have no signature across multi-vectors across your organization. Leveraging the intelligence that we've gathered through incident response, the intelligence that we've gathered through having endpoints and network sensors out there, email sensors out there, and of course any intelligence that's published. So that's the detect and prevent part. That's going to be your technology piece. But being able to respond and analyze that and actually make an intelligent decision, wiping the system that alerts from a FireEye doesn't necessarily get the hacker out when we have lateral spread in effect. So you want to be able to not only detect it and prevent it, but when it does come through, when something does come through, you want to be able to contain it, understand the impact of what it did, investigate it, know everything, be able to reconstruct that whole kill chain, and then get it out of the network as quick as possible. So when someone asks me, like in a quick 2 minutes or less than that, what is it that FireEye does? We take the average hacker living in a network at 205 days and we reduce it to minutes. That's what FireEye does. So the whole idea of this pinwheel here is to basically use the technology and use the services so that you can augment your own security team, get the stuff out as soon as you detect that it's in the network, before it has a chance to take a copy of everything that you do and document all of your behavior and your procedures. That's pretty much it. Mahalo.